I'm Matt, and this is my garage. Continuing with the S2. You know, just when I thought the fun was over, and I thought I was ahead of the cooling game on this car, man, did I find something that kind of blew me away. So you're going to want to check this out. Got that done, and also the oil cooler is back in the car, new lines, took care of that, and some other stuff that we've got taken care of on this car. So let's jump into the videos, and I'll show you some really scary stuff I found, and then how we're looking now, and we'll go from there. All right, let's get started. All right, back under the car. I have just flushed the two chassis cooling pipes, and now I'm going to take off. These are the heater hoses that run through the chassis. They go to and from the heater core up inside the cabin of the car. They kind of go through the bulkhead right there up to the heater core. So I'm going to disconnect those and see if I can flush that heater core without pulling it out of the car. So I'm going to do the best I can. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to give it a shot. So at least I get as much crap out as I can. I'm sure glad I took those heater core hoses off, because pipe is 100% completely full of corrosion. 100%. There's no water getting through there at all. That's crazy. All right, so I have taken one of those hoses, put an adapter on it, and I've got it draining down here into a bucket, and I'm spraying water through the other hose, and I've already flushed it a little bit, so I got a lot of crap that came out, and I ran it to the point where I had fresh water. So now I'm going to go in the reverse direction, spray water in the other hose, and just let it go and try to get as much crap out of there as I can. I mean, the one thing I don't want is anything in the cooling system like that can break loose and get into that new radiator, because that would just clog the radiator up and all this work would be for nothing. So it looks like I still got some work ahead of me. Ugh. All right, I'm going to see what I can do with these pipes. Here's what I ended up doing with the chassis pipes. So these were the ends. You can see this is the one that was completely clogged. Here's the other pipe. Big hole in it. All right, here's what I did. I just used a pipe cutter and I cut the ends off. And the pipe inside is clean. I did this on the back as well. And then I flushed the pipes out so I got clean water coming through. I pressure tested them and they're holding pressure, so I think they're good. So I think we're gonna probably bypass trying to get new chassis pipes and go with this for now. The only thing I'm worried about is not having, so it's like a rolled edge. Not gonna have that. I don't know if it's gonna work, but we're gonna try it and see if it holds and if we get any leaks. And if we do, then we'll have to replace the chassis pipes. Or maybe you can have those, if I pull them out, I might be able to roll those ends. I'm not really sure. But for now, I'm gonna try this. So I'm gonna hook up the heater hose pipes now, and then go to the back of the car and start putting those hoses and pipes back on. All right, we're getting into the last steps of the cooling system. Super excited. I dropped this radiator support. This goes up in the front of the car. It holds the radiator, condenser, the fans, all that stuff. Toward you, front of the car. Toward me, back of the car. All right. Radiator, here's a new radiator. It's going to sit in here just like this. Now in the car, this bolts to the top of the, call it the frunk, right? To the floor of the frunk. So these bolts go through that floor, they bolt right into the radiator. On the bottom, you got two bolts that come up from the bottom of the support that bolt directly into the radiator. Now a lot of folks online said, hey, be careful, these aluminum radiators can crack from the flex in the car, right? So as the body's flexing and this is flexing, both are fiberglass, so there's a lot of give, right? A lot of torque in this thing, and competing forces. So I took that to heart and I thought about it a little bit, and I'm like, okay, well, we're gonna go with aluminum radiator because I like the flow, but how do we make it so we can eliminate that, those competing forces on the radiator and eliminate any cracks? So what I'm gonna do is go with mounting bobbins on the bottom here. So the top will be mounted to the floor of the front, that'll be solid. The bottom will be mounted to bobbins, and they're basically like bushings with a bolt on or a stud on either side. And that bushing allows for flex. So as the body flexes separately from this radiator support unit, that bushing will take up that flex and let that radiator do what it wants to do without cracking. But there's a catch. There is no room for bobbins in here because this is a tight fit. There's no up and down play in this system. So here's what I gotta do. These are the mounts for the bottom of the radiator. So I'm gonna go underneath. Here's where the bolts come up from underneath. My bobbins are 0.8 inches in depth. So I need to modify the fiberglass to allow for that 0.8 inches. So what I'm going to do is do some fiberglass work. I'm going to cut a section out here, and then I'm going to lower this 0.8 inches and bond everything back together again with fiberglass. Drill my holes. I can mount my bobbins. Then on this side, top of my bobbins that mount to the radiator will still be flush with the surface of this radiator support, so all will be good. However, now we're going to have flex. Now we're going to have a lot of flex in the system. So I've got some work to do. This thing's really beat up as it is. You know, like all the cars, they're all broken and, you know, they're just in bad shape. I've never seen a good one that I've pulled out of the car, and I think I'm the first person to ever take this out of the car. It's got this old foam insulation that went between the radiator and the mounting. I'm going to take the fan out, clean the fan up, put some new foam in. This stuff is just deteriorating. It's gross. Clean this whole thing up, paint it black again, and then mount the radiator from above, put this in, mount it from below, and I should be good to go. So that's the next step. I'm on to it. I cleaned up the radiator mounting tray, degreased it, and this is where the radiator is going to mount. We're looking at the bottom. So I've cut a piece of wood that gives me the depth I need for the to use as a form as I lay some new fiberglass. I've also ground all this down quite a bit so my new fiberglass can adhere to that. Got into some good clean fiberglass, cleaned everything with acetone, so I should get some good adhesion. And what I'm going to do now is just wrap this whole thing like that and like this, and then when it dries, I'll flip it over, cut this section out from the top, and then I can go in there and lay some more fiberglass, and I'll have a nice new bottom of the radiator mount, and drill some holes in that, and that should work. Well, I got the first layer on. No, two layers of fiberglass, 3 in the corners. You see the piece of wood, it looks red and yellow. I put some grease on that and some motor oil, so when I cut it from the other side and pull it out, it's not gonna, hopefully not gonna stick to the fiberglass. So now today I'm going to keep working on this. I'm going to cut out the bottom of the mount here, so I can work on the back side of this new tray section. And I'm going to grind out some fiberglass in this section and this section. I got to rebuild this corner, so I got to grind all this out to get down to some good fiberglass to kind of graft it in. Same on this side. These corners are always broken on these things. I think they break from people removing the radiators without dropping the whole unit out of the car. Pretty sure that's going on. That's what's going on with a lot of these cars. So I'm now going to start cutting and grinding fiberglass, which really sucks. Here it is after I've cut out the old section of the support, and you can see the new fiberglass I had formed in there with that piece of wood. I cleaned up the fiberglass on the corners so I can go ahead and fix that now, graft in some new fiberglass, and it should adhere well. Clean this up a little bit, put some layers on the inside so I can seal it. It'll have good adhesion around here. I've ground all this down. And here we go. Quick shot of the radiator tray and the radiator installed, roughly installed. I might have to take it out again to get the fan shroud mounted in there properly. But wanted to put it in and see, make sure everything was lining up. And it looks good. Right there are the two mounts for the lower part of the radiator. And up here, you can see down in there, I've got the vibration mounts. So that'll hopefully eliminate any competing stresses that would lead to cracks in the radiator. And if we look at it from the front of the car, there's a radiator mount, and there's a little drop down I fabricated out of fiberglass to allow for those vibration mounts. So everything's looking good. Looks like it's fitting well. Now it's onto the radiator fans and getting those mounted to the radiator securely. And, right, radiator's back out. Here are these vibration mounts. They are in there good. I've got the shroud mounted now, and really sturdy, right? Got screws holding it all the way around. So that's great. It's not gonna shake and rattle. So it's ready to go in. And I think once I get this in, I can fit the fans in actually with the shroud mounted in the car. I can sneak the fans up in there and then bolt the fans on. So that's the way I choose to do it, because it's going to give me some more maneuverability getting this in. Time to put it back in again. There's one more piece of the puzzle in this cooling system, and that is the radiator fans. All right, tested these things. Two of them, well, one radiator fan worked, the AC fan worked, the second radiator fan did not work, and that's why it's disassembled right here on this bench. All right, this is just a simple electromagnetic motor, and it's got a couple basic parts. This is the casing of the fan. It's a stator. There's a permanent magnet inside. And this is the rotor. Has an armature, the windings. And right here has a commutator. And that's what you've heard of brushes, right? So the brushes sitting here, they run on this commutator. And basically, this is, I don't know if you can see that, but there's many different parts, voids in this commutator around the rotor, around the shaft, and every time the brushes cross over that void, it changes polarity on the windings, and that's what causes this electromagnet to continuously turn inside of this stator. Okay, so why didn't it work? Well, it didn't work because one of my brushes was not connected. Right here, I had an open circuit, had a bad wire, had a break, so this motor was never going to work. So I think it's an easy fix. I'm just going to strip this wire back a little bit, see if I can solder this back together, put it all back together again, and I don't see anything wrong with the rotor. The bearings pretty good, spinning freely. The windings look good. I don't see any broken windings. So this thing's pretty analog. I mean, there's no computer chip, and there's not a whole lot to diagnose with these. This looks good. Nothing's going to go wrong with the permanent magnets. So I think I make this connection, I put it back together again, and we should have a working fan. And that, hopefully, is the last piece of this cooling issue. What do I even call this? Extravaganza? That will be the last, hopefully the last issue with all these cooling challenges in the S2. Fingers crossed, right? Fingers crossed. All right. Well, I soldered that brush lead back on and reassembled the motor and put it over there on my DC tester, and it works just fine now. I think the hardest part to doing this is when you put it back together again, you got to hold those brushes out to get them over the commutator as you push this cover in, and you can't get your fingers in there. So what I did was I just took 2 pieces of wire and kind of looped them in under the cover like that, grabbed those brushes and then pulled out one on each side, and then I could slide that down in there. I had to configure the wires though prior to putting the cap in place, so I could get it on the end of the brushes and make sure the brushes were on the spring and retracted into their slots, and then I held it with the wire, and then I pulled the wire on both sides. I was able to push this down, the brushes got over the commutator, and that was it. That was the hardest part. So we salvaged the motor. It's working fine. So cool. Thank goodness. Now let's get it back in the car. Got my fans installed, shrouds in, everything's nice and tight, and I want to make sure my fans aren't hitting the shroud at all. So I've got my 12-volt box hooked up. Now I'm just going to check each fan by putting power on it, and hopefully they sound good. That's good. It's pulling 4.9 amps. Check this one. That's pulling about 6.6 amps. And now finally let's check the AC condenser fan. That's pulling about 5.5 amps, but sounds like it spins at definitely a higher RPM. So we're not hitting the shroud, everything's installed, all 3 fans are working. So hey, that's really good news. Now I just need to take a look at this wiring, make sure it's good, clean it up, attach the fans, make sure all the coolant lines are tight, and then fill it with coolant, and we should be close to starting. All right, little recap. So cooling is finished. Good stuff. Hey, here's what we did. It's quite a list. So number 1, replaced all the hoses on the car and all the aluminum pipes that were corroded, right? You saw those were all gone. We got new stuff in there. New heater hose throughout the entire car. The only heater hose I didn't replace is from the chassis pipes in the front up to the heater cord, and then back down to the chassis pipes in the front. They looked good, and trying to get them out of there and replace them is just a pain, so didn't want to go there. We had a leak at the header tank in the back. Fixed that. Turns out we had a 1/2 inch diameter outlet on the header tank, and we're using 5/8 heater hose. So that's why that was leaking. Put a little adapter on that, and everything is fine there now. Radiator, new radiator, went with the aluminum radiator. And in order to get that in, we had the fiberglass mounting unit. We had to take that whole thing out, and we wanted to put some vibration dampeners on the bottom of the radiator, so we modified, I don't know who we is, I modified the entire radiator tray so I could mount that radiator with those vibration mounts. So there was a lot of fiberglass work, and while I was at it, I repaired the corners of that mounting tray. It's back in the car, it looks really good. And then we had a bad radiator fan. one of the cooling fans was not working. The brush had disconnected from the wire, so I had to solder that. Got that fan working back in the car, so that's good. And I found out the wiring harness in the front of the car to the radiator fans had to shorten it, so I had to redo that little short section of wiring harness. And the list keeps going. There was a relay that bypassed the auto switch in the back. When the air conditioning was turned on in the car, it automatically went ahead and sent power to the radiator fan. So I pulled that out of there because it just looked like crap and it wasn't properly wired. It could mean that there's a problem somewhere else in the car, but we won't know that until we get the car started and then we go from there. But that little bypass hack job is gone. I flushed all the pipes through the chassis. Those aluminum pipes, the large ones and the small ones, got all flushed out the heater core, and pressure tested the aluminum pipes through the chassis, the big ones and the small ones for the heater hose. Everything checked out there. Had to cut off the ends of those small heater hose aluminum pipes that would go through the chassis of the car. They were corroded so bad, it was just terrible, completely clogged. So that's cut off. Those are hoses are hooked back up, and that's a nice clean system now. And then yeah, I think that kind of covers it. That was a lot of work. That was a lot more than I thought. But I think now it's a fantastic cooling system. I've been through everything on the car related to cooling, and I can't wait to start it up and just ensure there are no leaks and that everything's working properly. But filled it back up with fluid, so we're good to go. So that wraps up the cooling on the 78 Esprit. But that's not the end of what we're doing. We've still got transmission leaks to deal with. We're going to do a timing belt replacement. So this car is getting a real refresh and should be fantastic when it's all done. So next episode, look for some more work. All right, see ya.